I was standing in the dark watching people clink champagne glasses inside a brand new resort that cost $30 million, listening to music bounce across my fields like it owned the night. And the only reason my hands weren't shaking anymore was because I finally understood the truth. Every single bright, expensive inch of that building was sitting on my land, and they'd just finished constructing the most arrogant mistake of their lives. It didn't start with a letter. It didn't start with a friendly reminder from the HOA or one of those smug little notices they love sliding under your door like they're delivering commandments. It started with a call from a neighboring rancher named Mike, the kind of guy who never calls unless something's actually wrong, and he goes, "Daniel, you got a reason excavators are tearing through your north fence line." I remember just blinking at my kitchen wall phone pressed to my ear because my brain couldn't catch up to the sentence. Excavators. My fence line. Like it was nothing. Like it was public. Like I'd accidentally turned my deed into a suggestion. My property isn't a perfect little square that fits nicely on a developer's brochure. It's several connected parcels, some planted, some resting, some kept as rotation ground buffer space, future expansion. Every piece of it titled, surveyed, fenced, and taxed every year without fail. I wasn't living on that specific parcel at the time because farming doesn't work like suburban living. You don't stop owning land because you're sleeping somewhere else. You don't stop needing it because the grass looks calm. That parcel mattered to me. To them, it looked empty. And to the Maple Ridge Community Association, the HOA that wrapped around my property like an overeager vine, it looked like an opportunity they could rename into theirs. The first signs were almost polite in a creepy way. Survey stakes appeared near the edge. Trucks started idling on the access road. A few guys in reflective vests walked around like they belonged there, pointing, measuring, laughing. I did what a normal person does when they're trying not to be the crazy neighbor. I emailed the HOA office and introduced myself, Daniel Moore, owner of parcel 17B, 17C, and 18A. I attached the parcel numbers, the recorded plat references, and I asked calmly for copies of whatever survey or easement they were relying on before doing anything permanent. I wasn't rude. I wasn't threatening. I was careful because I've learned in life that the moment you show anger, people like this use it like a weapon. The reply came back fast, like she was waiting for someone to question her. "Hello, Daniel. It began like we were friends. The HOA has full approval. That land is designated community space. There's no need for you to concern yourself. No survey attached. No easement. No document. Just confidence wrapped in a smile you could hear through the screen." That email was signed by the HOA president, Karen Whitlock. Of course it was Karen. Not Karen as a meme, not a cartoon. A real-life grown adult who spoke in bullet points, wore leadership like a crown, and had that tone like the world was a room, and she was the only one allowed to talk. I drove out 2 days later because something about her certainty felt wrong. It felt unearned. And the moment I turned onto the dirt track that borders my north parcel, my stomach dropped hard enough I swear I felt it in my knees. The boundary markers were gone, not moved, gone. The grading cut straight through my parcel like someone had taken a knife to a map. Concrete forms were stacked where my fence used to be, and the fence itself, my fence had been pulled back and rolled up like trash. Dust hung in the air. The ground vibrated from machinery. And there was an excavator bucket sitting on my soil like it had every right to be there. I got out of my truck and just stood there for a second trying to process what it takes for someone to do that. Not, "Oops, we crossed the line." This was deliberate. This was, "We decided your line doesn't matter." I walked up to one of the workers and asked who authorized this. He shrugged like he didn't want to be the one holding the hot potato and said, "HOA project. We're just following the stakes." The stakes. The same stakes that suddenly didn't match my survey. I went back to my truck and sent another email firmer with photos attached, telling them they were trespassing, that they needed to stop immediately, and that if they believed they had an easement, they needed to produce it. This time I used words like liability and notice and recorded title. I wanted it on record. I wanted them to feel, even for a second, the edge of consequences. Karen replied within an hour. Construction is approved. Please refrain from interfering with community improvements. Interfering with my land. That's when the anger finally broke through the disbelief. I drove back out again, walked the line, and found my iron pins buried markers from a county survey years ago had been yanked or covered. Those pins don't just disappear. Somebody made them disappear. My fence posts had been pulled out, tossed aside. And then I saw the concrete truck. They were about to pour. I marched toward the site manager and told him to stop. He looked at me like I was the inconvenience, said he had permits, and if I had a problem, I should take it up with the HOA. That phrase, "take it up," makes my blood boil to this day because it's what people say when they're counting on you being too tired, too polite, too alone to fight. I called my attorney from my truck right there, hands tight on the steering wheel, and I said, "They're pouring concrete on my land." He didn't gasp. He didn't dramatize. He got quiet in that way that means he's switching into work mode, and he said, "Do not put yourself in front of equipment. Do not touch anything. Send one more written notice. Document every action. And Daniel, if they keep going after notice, let them. Let them." I remember my throat tightening because every instinct in my body wanted to scream and block and stop. But he explained it in a sentence that felt like ice water. If you stop them now, you save them from their own trespass. If they build it after notice, it becomes willful, and willful changes everything. So I sent notice. Again, clear, time-stamped, attached my survey, attached my deed references, told them they were building on property they did not own and had no easement to use. And then they poured anyway. The concrete hit my soil like an insult you can't take back. Steel rose out of ground they never bought. The next week, framing began. The next month, it was obvious this wasn't some small community improvement. This was a full-blown resort-style clubhouse, glass stone, huge footprint, the kind of thing you put on postcards when you're trying to impress people. And the entire time, Karen and the HOA acted like they were doing something noble, like they were rescuing unused land from neglect. Meanwhile, I was collecting evidence like my life depended on it. Photos with dates, drone shots from legal airspace, copies of every email, screenshots of their public posts, even the flyers they started putting in mailboxes bragging about Maple Ridge's bold new vision. I had a neighbor, a quiet older woman named Linda, who hated drama but hated dishonesty more, and she started forwarding me HOA meeting minutes. "I don't like what they're doing," she'd write, "and Karen is acting weird." Weird was a nice way to say tyrannical. In those minutes, I saw the same pattern over and over. Someone raised a concern about boundaries. Someone asked if the farm parcel was verified. Someone mentioned my emails and Karen dismissed it like swatting a fly. The land is community designated, she'd insist, like repeating it could make it true. They even had a board attorney, their own attorney, advising them to pause construction until the issue was clarified. And Karen overruled him. Overruled, like the deed was an opinion, like the survey was a rumor. Construction sped up, and at first I thought it was because they were excited. But eventually I realized they were rushing because the deeper they built, the harder it would feel to stop. They were trying to turn momentum into ownership. And for a minute, it worked. It worked on the residents. It worked on the contractors. It even worked on me in the quiet hours. I'm not going to pretend I was fearless. There were nights I sat at my kitchen table laptop open, rereading my own documents until my eyes blurred, wondering if I'd missed something. The city hadn't shut them down. Inspectors were showing up, passing things, letting it continue. That messes with your head. You start thinking, what if I'm wrong? What if there's a misplat? What if there's some clause buried in a filing from 20 years ago? What if I fight and lose, and I become the villain in their story? And the worst part is, the HOA kept moving like they knew something I didn't. Their confidence was relentless. It's hard to describe how exhausting that is, watching people steal from you with a smile, then acting annoyed when you object. There was one night, I remember it too clearly, where I started drafting an email that would have softened everything. Something like, maybe we can reach an amicable arrangement because I was tired, because I wanted the stress to stop, because I wanted to believe there was a version of this where I didn't have to become a person who sues his neighbors. My finger hovered over the trackpad and my chest felt tight, and I stared at that draft like it was a cliff. And then Linda sent me one more set of minutes. In the middle of the page, plain as day, was the line that snapped me back to reality. Their attorney recommended a pause. Karen wrote, "Stopping now would look bad. Worst case, we negotiate later." I read it twice, then a third time. Worst case. Like my ownership was a minor inconvenience they could bargain down after they got what they wanted. That sentence did two things at once. It made me furious and it made me calm. Because it told me they knew there was risk. They chose to proceed anyway, and they wrote it down. They didn't just trespass. They trespassed in bad faith. And that's when I stopped wavering. I deleted my soft email draft, shut my laptop, and I decided if they wanted to learn what ownership means, I was going to teach them in the only language people like Karen respect: paperwork with consequences. I went quiet after that. No more warnings, no more back and forth, just documentation. They mistook my silence for surrender because that's what bullies always assume. Construction didn't slow. It accelerated like confidence was fueling the schedule. Steel climbed glass, followed landscaping started. And then, the signs went up. The Ridge Club private events, weddings, retreats. I swear seeing the word private on a banner hanging over my land almost made me laugh out loud because it was so shameless it bordered on comedy. Karen started doing interviews, hard hat clipboard smiling for local papers like she'd discovered fire. She talked about increasing property values, bringing vision to life, turning unused space into community benefit. Unused. Right. Apparently, if you don't live on a piece of land every day and wave at people while holding your deed, it becomes fair game. Then came the invitations, ribbon cutting, community celebration, residents told to dress nice, local officials invited. I got one too, tucked into my mailbox like a dare. Karen even sent a neighborhood-wide email announcing the grand opening as a triumph over outside interference and baseless claims. Baseless. I archived that email like it was a trophy. Opening night arrived with music floodlights, cars streaming in. From the edge of my field, I watched headlights sweep across grass that used to be quiet, watched people pose for photos, watched Karen stand at the entrance like a queen receiving her court. There was a moment I thought I'd feel rage so strong it would knock me over, but instead, I felt calm, cold calm, the kind that settles in when you know the next move. The shutdown didn't come with sirens. It came with a filing, a survey, and a judge who read every email they ignored and every warning they dismissed. I hired a licensed surveyor who walked the parcel with county records, GPS, and iron pins. He didn't editorialize. He didn't dramatize. He just produced a report that said what my records already said: the entire structure, 100% of it, sat on my land. Not partially, not a corner, the whole thing. No easement, no consent, no ambiguity. My attorney filed for quiet title trespass and unjust enrichment and requested emergency relief. When the court granted an injunction pending review, it happened faster than anyone in that HOA thought possible. Overnight, the resort went dark. Events were canceled, deposits were frozen, vendors were told to stop. Security was ordered to stand down. Residents showed up the next morning expecting a normal day and found doors locked and notices posted, official notices, the kind that don't care about Karen's confidence. That's when the panic started. Karen called emergency meetings. She blasted emails like a fire hose, blaming contractors, blaming surveyors, blaming the city, blaming me, blaming anyone who wasn't her. She wrote like the victim of some unfair technicality, like the universe had betrayed her by caring about deeds. And then, because she couldn't help herself, she escalated in the dumbest way possible. When I stood on the gravel drive, watching staff carry equipment out under court order, she issued me an HOA fine for trespassing. Trespassing. On my land. That's not just arrogance, that's delusion. But I didn't argue. I didn't respond with a rage email. I paid it. I scanned it. I added it to the case file. Because sometimes the best way to defeat a bully is to let them prove over and over who they are. Discovery was brutal. Emails surfaced. Minutes surfaced. My warnings were there, time-stamped clear. Their attorney's caution was there. Karen's override was there. That worst case line stared up from the page like a confession. At the hearing, the HOA tried to claim it was an innocent mistake, a misunderstanding, an unfortunate map issue. The judge listened, then asked one simple question that sliced through all of it. Why did you continue construction after receiving notice from the landowner? Karen's lawyer looked down. Karen herself, sitting behind him with that tight little smile, went still. Silence answered the question because there was no good answer. The court found willful trespass and bad faith construction. The use of the property remained enjoined. Revenue records were ordered produced. Accounting became unavoidable. And that's when the HOA started eating itself alive. Vendors demanded payment. Couples demanded refunds. Insurers denied coverage. Lenders called in questions. Residents who had cheered the project now wanted to know why their dues had funded a lawsuit-shaped crater. Karen tried to hold the board together with threats and speeches, but once people smell liability, loyalty disappears fast. I watched the shift happen in real-time. Emails that used to copy her on everything stopped including her. Meetings that used to revolve around her started happening without her. And when the board realized she had personally authorized continuing construction after legal notice, they panicked in a different way. She resigned before a vote, then tried to deny she resigned, then stopped answering calls. She went from community visionary to unavailable in a matter of days. The final order came down without drama, typed in plain language that stripped the story of all its noise. Title, quieted in my name. Every improvement affixed to the land declared a fixture belonging to the owner of the soil. The resort changed hands without moving an inch. $30 million of concrete steel wiring and imported finishes mine because they built it on my ground. The HOA was ordered to disgorge profits, cover my fees, and maintain the property until transfer. Karen was named individually for authorizing construction after notice. Her last email promised transparency. It delivered nothing. The afternoon the judgment posted, I drove out with a locksmith and my attorney, and we changed the locks. It was almost surreal watching electronic badges fail, watching staff stare at doors that no longer recognized them, watching residents gather at the gate, reading notices like they were trying to translate reality into something they could accept. Some shouted, some apologized. Most just stood there blinking, finally understanding that maps matter and confidence doesn't rewrite ownership. Karen showed up once late in the day, still trying to wear authority like perfume. She marched up in heels that sank slightly into the gravel, clipboard in hand like it was a weapon, and she demanded to know what I thought I was doing. I looked at her for a long second. This woman who had smiled through interviews while bulldozers tore up my fence. This woman who had dismissed my ownership as baseless. This woman who had fined me for trespassing on my own land, and I felt something in me settle. Not hatred, not triumph, just clarity. I said calmly, I'm standing on my property, Karen,